Hi, I'm Detroit City Councilman James Tate, representing District 1, and we want to thank you for joining us today. We are here at Cuts Lounge, the barbershop, actually in the lounge part. You may be asking, what are you doing here? Under what authority are you at Cuts Lounge when the governor issued a stay-at-home order? Well, she's actually having the press conference right now, and it goes into effect at midnight. So this is all pre-recorded, so we wanted to make sure that you understand the parameters. We are taking this very seriously, but we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to communicate with you all of the important information that we have. Specifically, now that we've gotten beyond the scare, the fact that the virus is here and it's here in Detroit, there's a lot of things that we now have to start dealing with and unpacking. Many of these issues deal with our psychological aspect of life. Some of these things deal with our financial aspect. All of this is about our health. How do we remain sane and understanding that our responsibility is to keep our families and our neighbors safe as well during this situation? I can't say that we're going to have all the answers today, but what I can say is that we're going to do our best to provide any information that's going to help us endure and overcome, which we shall do. Joining us today, we'll have a financial consultant and certified public consultant who will give us a few tips on how to stretch your resources during this time of uncertainty, as well as better protect your families as we move beyond this crisis. We're also going to be joined by a mental health expert who's going to give us some better understanding of how to cope with this cabin fever, how to cope with this sudden change of our daily lifestyle. But joining us first, we have with us Crystal Hepburn. She is the team lead of Children's Special Health Services with the Detroit Health Department. She's going to provide us with a few useful tips on how to keep your family safe and both inside and outside of your home. So Crystal Hepburn, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you providing just some basic information, first of all, for the residents in District 1 and whoever tunes in. Talk to us about this coronavirus. I mean, we hadn't heard about it in the past. All of a sudden it popped up in 2019 at the end of the year. And now we're at a point where it's a worldwide pandemic affecting human population all around the world. Talk to us about, the origins, if you know it, and what should we do to try to protect ourselves?
Okay. Thank you so much, Councilman Tate, to allow us to go ahead and come and speak and share the information that the Detroit Health Department has to provide the residents with some information and education. So the coronavirus is relatively new. It is a respiratory illness that can spread from person to person. It's called the novel coronavirus, and it was first identified in 2019 after an outbreak in China. So the 2019 virus has gone ahead and been known to spread from person to person anytime somebody is within 6 feet, with it being a respiratory illness, anytime respiratory droplets are produced and shared by an individual coughing or sneezing. If they are infected, then it has a possibility of transmitting to somebody else, especially it could be somebody sneezing on a surface. If somebody touches that particular surface, it's available in live on their hands. If they happen to touch their face, either eyes, nose, or mouth, there is a possibility of getting that transmitted at that particular point. So we want to go ahead and ensure that there is the space of 6 feet, and also that people are individually and continually washing their surfaces, and most importantly, washing their hands. So the symptoms with this particular COVID-19 virus would be a fever of 100.4 or higher, a dry cough, and shortness of breath. So we are still learning more and more about it. So at first, when it first came out, we wanted to go ahead and make sure that everybody was washing their hands, that you were aware about washing the surfaces. And as we learn more and more, then you heard about social distancing, keeping the space, try to avoid hugging, kissing, try to avoid large gatherings. So the more we know, the more we'll be able to go ahead and share with you.
So talk to me about, now that it's here and we are providing information on how to stop the spread, how do we, if you're at home, how does that affect what happens outside of your home?
Okay, So if you're at home, you want to go ahead and make sure that you have your medication stocked up, you've got some supplies stocked up. If you have been in an area in which somebody has been positive or maybe close proximity, maybe you were at a gathering last week and you found out that somebody in the grocery store or maybe one of the organizations that you participate in has been positive, you want to then go ahead and do self-isolation within your own home because you want to minimize the spread to others, especially the vulnerable populations. Anybody that's older, as well as those individuals that have chronic illnesses, such as heart disease, any type of lung disease, diabetes, and those that are immunocompromised. So in order to go ahead and be safe as you're in your home, you want to go ahead and be able to monitor your temperature. You want to be able to monitor it at least twice a day. Identify and write down your symptoms, write down the details as you come across additional symptoms. This particular virus has an incubation period, so it can last with you anywhere from 2 to 14 days before symptoms are starting to show. So even if you're feeling really well, and then come the 5th day, you're starting to go ahead and notice you've got a fever. The 6th day, you have now a dry cough. You're starting with the shortness of breath or tightness in your chest. You want to continue to go ahead and monitor those symptoms, okay? It doesn't mean necessarily that you have the full-blown virus, and this particular virus can affect individuals very differently. It can be very mild, kind of similar to a flu, or it can be very severe. The ones that happen to be very severe are those individuals with the chronic medical conditions that I mentioned, and especially the older population, some of the complexities that come along with that virus because they don't have the same immune system as we do. They may have other underlying medical conditions or take medications. It can also turn to pneumonia, and that's where they need to go ahead and make sure that they are being proactive. If they have any difficulties breathing, to contact their primary care provider over the phone or their triage department of their emergency room before they just go in, because they need to take extra precautions so it doesn't spread to others that may be in the emergency room or in the PCP's office.
Well, I actually wanted to talk about that a bit because you mentioned that if you're someone who has a compromised immune system, and if you're in the high risk group, and we talk about seniors, there's this myth that's out there that, especially with young people, that young people can't get the virus, can't catch it. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that even if you're not showing symptoms, you can actually be a silent carrier and pass it on to someone else.
That is correct. At the moment, this particular virus can affect anybody. It affects small children, affect the middle-aged population, as well as the oldest population. However, it affects everybody differently. So those that may be a little bit younger, they may not take it as seriously. They still may go ahead and go out, don't practice the social distancing. They may be those silent carriers, and they may be taking it home to other individuals with their family. And if they have somebody who's immunocompromised or has those medical conditions, you don't need to be older to have those particular medical conditions. Then once it transmits to them, then we've got those complex issues and also those complications that would come across to that particular individual. So ideally, we want to make sure that everybody is continually washing their hands, making sure as soon as they come in from outside areas that they are wiping down doorknobs, door handles, doorbells, anything at all that others may have gone ahead and touched, because it can live on the surface for a number of days. So unfortunately, there is some information. Of course, we've got the details on the hospitalizations, and it seems to be the older individuals who are being hospitalized because of their immune system and also multiple health conditions. It doesn't mean that it's not going to go ahead and affect somebody who's, say, 40 and healthy. It can affect that individual as well.
So let me ask you, if, right now, if what's being allowed to be open during this mandatory stay-at-home order, if you will, grocery stores, of course, pharmacies, if I have to go out, and I've got to say this, people say, what if someone sneezes on a vegetable? What does that do to an individual who may end up purchasing that vegetable, or maybe even lick their fingers when they're touching a plastic bag. You know, people do that a lot in the produce section. How do you better protect yourself if you, in fact, hypothetically speaking, have one of those vegetables or those bags, one of those bags inside of your home?
Yes. So, of course, you have the ability to go ahead and touch anything and carry any type of virus at any particular time. Now, you can't go ahead and affect what somebody else has done previously. All you can do is safeguard yourself as best as possible. So if you are unfamiliar, if you did not see it come off the truck, and I believe it would be best practice anyways, that when you do get produce, because it's not in a sealed container, you do go home and wash all of those items. You want to go ahead and wash your hands as soon as you come home. Take them out of the bags. If you happen to go ahead, say onions, potatoes, tomatoes, etc. If you put in those individual bags, wash your hands again before you start prepping your food. Continually washing your hands, making sure that you are using definite soap and water. You're washing your hands vigorously for at least 20 seconds, making sure that you are getting into all areas. Sometimes people are just washing like this. However, viruses can go on the back of your hands, go in between your fingers, under your fingernails. You want to make sure you cover each and every part of your surface of your hands when you're washing your hands.
So I'm seeing you have a ring on, and I have one as well. Do you take the ring off first? Is that also advisable?
I have been taking my ring off because this is such a new virus. We are not exactly sure. And it is told to us by those that have been researching this particular virus that it can live on metal surfaces for a couple days. It does vary on each and every surface. So I would go ahead and I would take it off first and foremost, if available. Put it to the side, make sure that you are getting a great wash for all of your fruits and vegetables, your hands, so then you're not continuing to transmit it, because you could be coming in, touching your door handle, then you're going into the kitchen, you're touching that plastic bag, you're putting it out, you're touching your faucet. So trying to minimize transmission between all of these items, because you may have children at home that go ahead and now are filling up the Kool-Aid jug and touching that same faucet. So once you touch different surfaces, you want to also clean those with disinfecting wipes, or you can make a homemade solution with a bleach and a water combination. So there's a number of ways, but you want to minimize transmission as much as possible. It's not going to guarantee that it's 100% done, but you're going to take your risk down.
So I wanted to mention, you mentioned bleach, and that kind of takes me to the transition of myths versus facts. There's all these myths out there, and you know, there's a lot of conspiracies as well. But let's deal with first the myths. One of those myths I heard about is if you gargle, which sounds dangerous by itself, but if you gargle with bleach, it somehow immunizes you from being susceptible to this virus. True, not true? I think I know the answer, but true or not true?
Not true. Unfortunately, at this particular time, there is no vaccine, no preventative measure that we can take precautiously in advance. However, having different types of chemicals, ingesting any chemical at all, would be definitely too dangerous. I would go ahead and I would recommend, if you are concerned, you can continue to hydrate. Okay, being home, you may want to go ahead and switch it up between hot tea, some waters. Continue to hydrate, because you are going to be home. You may not be as active. We really don't take as much water in on a daily basis as we should, but I would not go ahead. I've seen different myths on the internet about the vinegar, and if you go ahead and if you order this now, you can go ahead and protect yourself from the virus. These are opportunities that people are taking to work on our stress and our anxiety and the unknown. I would only recommend information from the CDC, Michigan.gov, or your PCP, as they are providing information and getting information. The Detroit Health Department is constantly monitoring, and we're getting updates from the state of Michigan government and their details on their researches, as well as CDC. So you need to use credible sources. Sometimes we get some phone calls and say, well, I saw on Facebook that somebody else did this. Please refrain from trying any of those methods. I would hate to see somebody else end up with other issues, other medical issues, or burns due to chemicals being ingested.
So let me ask you before we wrap up, now with the stay-at-home order in place for at least 3 weeks, there's possibly a fear for some people of going outside and just smelling the fresh air. What are the dangers, or what would you advise someone who says, you know what, I can't stay in my home all day long. I need to get out and get some fresh air. I want to take a walk. I want to do some activities. What's your advice to those individuals who are really feeling the pressure? And this is just the beginning.
Exactly. It is just the beginning, and this is probably going to be one of the most difficult times because we are so used to having the independence, going out to see families, going ahead and enjoying social gatherings. So staying at home, you can still go ahead and get a walk in the neighborhood. You want to go ahead and make sure that you're getting some fresh air. That's good for your mental health as well as your physical health. Some other opportunities while you're at home, you could possibly connect with those older individuals because they may be feeling isolated as well. Go ahead and contact them, have them speak to you over the phone if you have the opportunity to FaceTime. That way you're getting more social interactions. There's a lot of children out of school. Parents can take this opportunity to go ahead and have time to go ahead and read various books or look up educational information, really spend that quality family time. You want to go ahead and make sure that you do have that one-on-one time. You're taking your mental health inside just as seriously as you are your physical health.
Yeah, we want to, we're going to talk to a psychological and mental health expert right after we speak with you. I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. And is there anything else that you want to add to let people know before you wrap up?
Most definitely. The Detroit Health Department has a hotline set up for all of its residents. It's operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Individuals can call if they have any questions about the actual virus, perhaps they were exposed, that they may hear from somebody else, that somebody else was positive, if they have questions, concerns, if they're starting to get symptoms and they want to get screened or see if they are eligible for the testing. That phone number is 313-876-4000. Individuals would then press 1. It may take a second or two before an actual live person will answer, but somebody is there 24/7. We also have an email that is being monitored. That email address is dhdOutbreak@detroitmi.gov. So it's the letter DHDOUTREACH at detroitmi.gov.
So we're going to make sure that all of that information is available for those who are watching. But again, that number 313-876-4000, and then press the number 1.
That is correct.
That is the health department who has come together and has a 24-hour humanly manned line for any questions regarding COVID-19.
Most definitely.
Crystal, we want to thank you again for joining us today. Crystal Hepburn, she is the team lead for Children's Special Health Care Services at the Detroit Health Department. Thanks again, and you stay safe out there as well.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you. Stress, anxiety, fear, and depression. These are all mental health concerns that have increased since the COVID-19 pandemic has changed our daily routines and effectively put a pause on what we consider normal life. Many of us were able to mask those challenges because of all of the distraction, whether it's the sports with the kids or work or you name it, shopping even. Now all of that has changed as a result of the stay-at-home order recently issued by the governor. Our homes, which used to be, for most of us, a place of refuge and safety, has now become, for many, a place where they feel trapped and confined. Joining us will be Dr. Michele Reid. She's a psychiatrist. She's also the chief medical officer at CNS Healthcare, to provide us with some insight on how to cope through this cabin fever and how to deal with the stress that comes along with feeling trapped in a certain situation that is uncertain. Dr. Reid, we want to thank you for joining us today. I'm sure you have a lot to do. I see It sounds like you're at work right now, yes?
Yes, I am.
All right, so we're not going to take up much of your time because, especially in what you do, you're very, very valuable to the community. I wanted to talk a little bit about the stress. We mentioned earlier about being in the place that is typically your place of refuge is now for many people a place where they feel trapped and confined. Talk to us a little bit about what that does to the human psyche and how should people cope? What are some coping mechanisms for people who do feel confined in this type of environment?
So the expectations, families need to ramp down their expectations. But I think the biggest way to deal with this isolation is to get a routine, a new routine, and stick with that routine. I cannot stress how important getting proper sleep is going to be. So going to bed at the same time every night and getting up is going to put you in a great place. And other things to do during the day, please, please, please stay off the constant internet. Maybe check it once or twice a day, but don't be on the internet, social media, checking every day, every hour for how many new cases are. This whole getting the facts is what's so most important. And I feel that the best place to find facts are at the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services on their coronavirus line, on the coronavirus line for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and also for the Center for Disease Control. And I have provided those resources for you. So go to these reputable sites and look for what it is. So a lot of keeping the stress and anxiety down is knowing exactly what the disease is and how the disease is transmitted. And I think you indicated you had another medical expert on talking about that earlier. So again, we can control a lot of what we're doing in terms of hand washing, in terms of keeping your hands away from your face, in terms of if you are an essential worker, if you know you're sick, not to be going in. So I think getting the facts will help quell down the anxiety. But the biggest thing to do in the home is to get a routine for yourself.
There's a lot of anxiety for those who end up having to go outside and just get a breath of fresh air. I talked to our previous presenter, and she actually recommended getting out, taking a breath. Let's say it's not just getting out, going and taking a breath, but you know what? I ran out of food. I've got to go to the grocery store now. Now my anxiety just pumps up even more because I don't know about this unknown world. What would you advise someone who has to, even despite their best desires to stay home, it's a necessity for them to leave and go out and venture out to those essential places? What would you advise an individual finding themselves in that type of situation?
Well, most places I found interesting enough, businesses are taking into account these things. My cousin went to Costco this weekend, and there were quite a few people in line, but they had tape on the floor having you stand 6 feet apart, and they had only one line, and she said they got you out of there really quick. A number of businesses have early morning hours that are just designed for people who are pregnant, people who are immunocompromised, people who are over age 60, so that's another good thing. Mostly the thing is when you go out and you see your friends, don't hug them, don't shake their hand, don't kiss them, keep your hand away from your face and your nose and your mouth as much as possible. Wash those hands when you've touched something that's contaminated. With me, I get on the elevators and I use my elbow or the back of my knuckle.
Yeah, we're doing this a lot now.
Yes, to be doing that. And then again, in general, it's going to be safe to go out for average Americans if you practice the social distancing and practice everything that we talked about relative to keeping those hands please and not clean and not touching your nose, eyes, face, or mouth. Those are important. Minimize your contact when you're out. But again, getting out for some fresh air, keeping yourself, walking down your block, keeping 6 feet away from a person next to you will be good. And we've been working a lot with the health department, who really is talking about, there's a big difference. I hope your earlier speaker talked about the difference between just contact and exposure. They're looking at, yes, you may have been in a room of individuals and there could have been somebody who you didn't know was positive there, but really they're looking for you to have a sustained contact with that individual, like spending more than an hour with them closer than 6 feet apart. So again, it's not just that walking down the line in a grocery store, unless somebody specifically coughed right into your eye, nose, or mouth, that you would be picking up a virus. So the social distancing should protect most people.
And I think it's also important for us to not take it personally if someone wipes down a table after you leave, or a doorknob or anything like that, because, you know, ultimately it's all of our responsibility to keep everyone safe, not just myself and you, but everyone. Don't take it personally.
And I think at first, when it happened to me 2 days ago, I thought like that. And I said, well, gee, she's keeping me safe. So I felt good that, well, she wipes that down after every customer, so I'm safe going into her business. So actually, it made me feel better. So I see a lot of creativity and innovation in people during this time of how we can keep in touch with each other and to stem the tide from that isolation. And the other thing to be calling and checking on, I have a godmother who's about 97 and another one who's about 94, and they're in Illinois and Pennsylvania. And my sister and I take turns, you know, calling them every other week to make sure they're okay and to keep in touch with them. So I think mostly we have like a hit list of people that we need to call and check on. But, you know, think about your friends that may not be working now because the type of business they have is a non-essential business, and they could have some stresses or strains. And I have another friend whose brother-in-law has recently developed cancer and is going through cancer chemotherapy. So he has to go in, but his wife was not allowed to go up into the treatment with him. She had to drop him off. She couldn't even wait in the hospital lobby. So they went and took some toilet paper and paper towel. They cooked some food and brought it over. So I think paying attention to friends and family members and acquaintances and neighbors who are in need was great. I was talking to my girlfriend on the phone who did her consulting work with the public schools. And while I was on the phone with her, her neighbor knocked on the door, you know, asking her, I'm going to the store, do you need any paper towel or anything? And she was fine. But I just see so many more random acts of kindness and neighbors looking at each other. It really lets me see what we're made out of here.
So, I mean, so essentially, we still should keep our bonds close and maybe even develop new bonds, which is important, even if we're not able to be physically in front of each other. Dr. Reid, before I let you go, I just got one question. We're going to get past this. We always do. I'm a man of faith, and we also talk about, you know, we look in the history books, there have been plagues that have wiped out people. I'm not saying that's going to be the case this time, but we as human beings, we're resilient. We persevere. We get through things. There's going to be an after. We don't know how long this is going to last. Psychologically, how does this time frame that we're in right now, how does it potentially affect our mindset, our emotional and psychological well-being after all of this?
Well, I think that where we're going to wind up with, Councilman Tate, is a new normal. And I liken it back to 9/11. After 9/11 occurred, I had a number of trips planned. They all got canceled, and it was probably over 2 years before I got on a plane again. And now, prior to this time, I probably would travel about once a month. And what I see is it's different. I mean, I used to could roll up to the airport a half an hour before your plane took off and be able to get on that plane and go, and the bags could be overweight and you could take all kind of liquids with you. And now, I mean, in your psyche, you have just prepared for that, you know, going to the airport, you know, a minimum of 90 minutes earlier, packing much lighter than you would, not taking any liquids, converted all my toiletries. I don't any longer take full sizes with me. Everything, you know, lotion is in a little 3-ounce bottle. So just like we adjusted and we had a new normal, and over time I came to realize, well, gee, it is different. It can be more cumbersome, but in the end, I felt safer. In fact, sometimes I occasionally get stopped with TSA and you have to have a pat down, and they ask, is that okay? I said, oh yeah, good. I'm gonna have my free government massage today. And then I crack them up when I say that. So, but it's become a new normal. We've adjusted to that. And I do believe with this particular pandemic, we're gonna adjust. But one thing I cannot stress enough about protection, about 18 months from now, 24 months from now, there will be a vaccine for this coronavirus. And I cannot say strong enough how important it's going to be for people like yourself and myself in the community to be giving strong recommendations for vaccine. Even now, those flu vaccines are available to the end of the month. Pneumonia will be available ongoing. And I think that, again, we really need to start now planning for when the vaccine is available to make sure we're getting enough of it and that we're giving strong recommendations for everybody to get vaccinated. So I think that's one way that we will be able to protect ourselves, even though that's a little ways out, but it's not too early to start planning for that now.
Yeah, but I don't know how we're going to substitute the fist bump for the man hug. I love the man hug, but you got to make some changes. Doc, we appreciate you joining us. Dr. Michele Reid, she's a psychiatrist and the Chief Medical Officer of CNS Healthcare. Thank you so much for joining us, and you stay safe out there. All right?
You stay safe also, Councilman Tate. Thank you so much.
All right, we appreciate you. You take care.
Okay, thank you.
The COVID-19 pandemic is unlike anything most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. Even prior to this crisis, many Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, and the economic fallout that we're hearing post-COVID-19 is absolutely staggering. Here's some numbers. In 1 week, jobless claims jumped by a third to 281,000 from 211,000. That's just 1 week. Experts are predicting an initial job claims for unemployment to reach a record 2.5 million in this month alone. Hearing all of this is scary, but having to experience it is even more dire if you're someone who finds themselves without having a financial cushion to protect you from all of these losses. Joining us next is Mr. Matthew Parker. He's financial consultant and certified public accountant with information on which and what types of prudent financial moves you should make and take now to best endure during this current crisis, as well as prepare for those days when we are beyond the current pandemic. So we want to thank you, Mr. Matthew Parker, and we want to make sure we get it right. You are the managing partner of Aliff Parker Financial Services, LLC, financial consultant, as well as certified public accountant,
Yep.
certified public accountant. And we want to talk to you today about the financial challenges that many people are going through. People were living paycheck to paycheck in many households prior to this pandemic, and this could only exacerbate that challenge for folks. What are some of the words of wisdom, advice that you can provide anyone who find themselves in the middle of uncertainty and not knowing what's going to come after this in terms of their financial situation?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thanks to you for having me, Councilman Tate. Appreciate it. As you mentioned, right now everyone is sort of in panic or survival mode, as you would imagine. So everyone is spending more money than they normally would in preparation for the unknown. And so a lot of that's put a lot of strain on budgets that aren't already there in the first place. And so a lot of times you see people going out buying canned goods, buying rice, things like that, that might last you 6 to 7 months. But, they're stocking up because they don't know next week if it'll even be available. So that additional surplus does create a strain on a lot of people's finances. So what I've been doing is thinking about things from kind of two different perspectives. One is, what can you do right now in the current state, so as of today, and then what steps you can take after we get out of this, epidemic crisis and the virus calms down and we start getting back to our regular day-to-day. That way, when the next time something comes up, hopefully nothing nearly this severe, we have a better handle of understanding how to control, our circumstances. The first thing I would say is it's always important to stay alert and aware of what's going on with the different governmental stimulus packages. So as you may know, you've seen a lot of things in the news about them offering different opportunities, different ideas about creating stimulus checks for individuals. Right now, I think the latest package is basically saying that if you're an individual that's not married and you make under $75,000, they're going to try to get you a maximum of $1,200 check. And they're going to base that based on either your 2018 filed tax return or the most recent tax return. And I also know too, they're thinking about even people who don't file tax returns, if you made under a certain amount of money, trying to still get you some information, some money to help you out. But they're basing it off of prior year tax returns. Because right now, as you may know, 2019 tax returns more likely are not done yet because you have until April 15th to do those. So that's the first thing, is just making sure you stay aware of the different stimulus packages that the government is trying to give out. So I believe if you're married, the threshold is $150,000 or less. If you're individual, $75,000 or less. After that, it starts to phase out the benefit. And I think if you have a child, you get $500 for each child or dependent. So that's one thing that's going to happen. I think there's going to be 2 waves. So I think the first one could be as soon as April 6th. And then after that, another one in May. So that's the first thing I would say, just to be aware of that. Going along with that, I'll also say that, like I mentioned before, people who are filing tax returns, the extension is now gone from April 15th to July 15th, meaning that not only do you have that much time to file, but you also have that time to pay, which is a big deal because people who owe taxes normally you will file an extension April 15th, but your tax that will be due has to still be paid. You have additional time to file the return, but not make the payment. So now if you traditionally owe taxes or think you might owe taxes, you have until July to pay taxes that would be due this year. They're giving you an automatic additional couple months. That being said too, the next thing I would say is just understanding your kind of day-to-day cash restraints and debt. So when I think about debt, I think about things that are essential. So your mortgage, car payments, phone bills, things that you need to have in order to keep your household running. And then or costs that would be more discretionary. The things that you like are nice to have that you could probably maybe do without, like maybe cable or certain subscriptions to streaming sites, things like that. And when you prioritize those things, I would say is I would call each of your individual essential debt listings that you have listed on that side and see what opportunities they have available. Because like I said, the government has also stated they're going to try to put certain holds on certain collections. So a lot of mortgage companies have been delaying, payments. Student loans say they're not going to be charging interest for a certain period of time. So a lot of companies are automatically going to do this, but I wouldn't take that assumption on. I would personally just try to call and make sure that your particular entities are doing that. And they might be offering different plans. Not everyone's doing the same type of plan. So they might either defer or they might forgive certain payments, which is a big deal because if they're deferring it, that means that you're going to actually still owe that money. It's just not owed until whenever they resume collections. If it's forgiven, then that money essentially is considered paid. And so you will pick up as if you were paying all those months. So that's a big deal. Also with that, you should also understand when the interest is going to start to take into effect again. So right now, interest is being frozen on certain accounts, but that doesn't mean that they can't retroactively put the interest as if it was, say, for example, March 3rd, and then you go to July and you say, okay, I'm in July now, I should start here. Well, they say, well, according to what we agreed upon, your interest is going to go back as if it was March 3rd. That's an important detail to understand because you don't want to get hit with an unexpected balance that has a lot of interest built into it.
So you essentially want to make sure that you're taking the time right now to look at all the paperwork, all of these plans, everything that you're a part of, because it very well may sound good today, but down the line, you still going to have to pay something at some point.
Right.
It's just how much, how soon, and what would that look like for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And so, and then along with that too, is when you kind of create that listing of essential versus discretionary, I like to use a budgeting concept of saying, okay, if I have $100, I would say 50 of that should go toward my essentials. So mortgage, things like that. Discretionary, about 30%. So that would be going out to eat, restaurants, clothes, subscriptions, things like that. And then 20% should go toward my debt / savings. And so now with the times being, everything being closed, that 30% that would normally go toward restaurants, movies, things like that should
all the side
flow over to the other side, the debt and savings. So that's something that you should start. It's never too late to start it because I always say that it's a mindset more than anything else. And so as you start to practice this discipline, it'll carry over into further years and become easier for you to do that. So that kind of leads us into kind of like the second piece is for those of you that are involved in investments and things like that currently, a lot of people are freaking out because the market has been having historical volatility over the last couple of weeks. And what I would say is number one is always remember your principles. So if you started investing, stay true to those principles, even in these kind of times, because right now, the way I think about it is that you shouldn't have money in the stock market that you need within 10 years. So if you do have money that you have in the stock market you need within 10 years, then that money shouldn't be in there. And we should try to figure out a way to get that out so that way it's in more liquid form. If you are involved with money that's 10 years or further, then you should, obviously consult with your personal financial advisor. But I would think you would want to leave it in there because you don't want to realize these losses right now, because the market, as we know it, has always been known to increase once it gets good news that the economy is going to start back up. So I wouldn't panic, and I would just make sure I would go back to my principles that I established when I first started investing. What are my goals? What am I looking for? And if you don't have any, well, it's a great time now to develop some, because at the end of the day, that's going to be what guides you. See, the big thing is you don't want to be reactive, you want to be proactive. So when things happen, you can always go back to what your strategy is and compare it to that. So that way you have control. The more control you have, the more peace you're going to have. So
let me ask you this. I keep hearing from people, now's the time to invest in stocks. I don't even know if the stock market is open to allow you to do that right now, but because things are so low, you're hearing people saying, now's the time to get into this, get into that. They talk about all these historical situations where I remember when Apple first started, it was, it traded at this number, and now look at it. And people are kind of equating that same kind of situation to what we see right now. What's your advice to someone who says, you know what, I think now's the time for me to invest again, if that's even allowable at this point in time in history. I don't follow the market as closely as you and others, but what's your advice to someone who thinks now's the time?
So I guess the first thing is, yes, it is opportunities to buy. So the market is still open, you still can invest. There have been things that have been going on because of the volatility in the market, that they have these trading freezes. So if the market drops a certain percentage within a certain period of time, they stop trading for say an hour or 2 hours, then they resume trading. So you're going to see some of that throughout the day, but overall, you can still buy and trade as you would normally if this wasn't a crisis. The reason why people are saying that right now is now time to buy, because like you said, the market has dropped substantially. Like before this all happened, the Dow, for example, was at almost 30,000. Now it's at 19. And that means that it erased the last 6-7 years of increases. So before Donald Trump got into office, we've gone back beyond that point. And so what that means is that a lot of the companies that are doing well overall, normally outside this epidemic, are still going to do well once the epidemic goes away. So all their costs, all their shares per cost are cheaper now. So you can get in at a cheaper price and then let it grow. What I would say is the cautionary thing is understanding when is the bottom, right? So, no one can predict that, that if you could do that, then, you're in the wrong business right now. So what I would say is that, number one is you want to definitely have somebody that you can talk to that is trained in this area, because, understanding, like having different people that are advocates for you is very important. But to the extent that you want to get involved, number one is I would say, understand how much you have. So back to the whole policy of creating your budget, right? You shouldn't have money in the market that is 10 years or less that is needed. So anything that you can say, okay, I can afford to keep something for 10 years or more, allocate that amount of money and say, let's say, for example, it's $10,000. So then with that, what I would understand is try to understand, well, what are the areas that once this, epidemic goes away, are going to grow, are going to benefit from, having the economy restart. And then the other side you could do is say, okay, well, what things are you interested in? So maybe you like Nike, maybe you like Apple, maybe you like, General Motors. And then you start to follow them. So start tracking them as the news progresses. So if I want to invest in those 3 stocks, I'm going to start reading articles, reading news alerts about those companies to kind of get an idea of when they're going to start producing again. And then at that point, that kind of triggers you to say, okay, they're shifting back to regular business, which means they're going to start earning more money, which means that their prices are going to start increasing because the value per year is going to go up because they're showing profits. And that's when it's going to be starting time to get in and make sure that you start to invest. So I would say number one is understand how much money you have to allocate for at least 10 years or more. 2, identify things you either like or opportunities in the industries that you feel are going to benefit after the crisis kind of has averted. And then 3, start right now to follow those industries or companies. And that way you can start to understand when they're going to start to kick back up, and then you can, get invested in them.
So it sounds like right now you're saying really plan. Now is the time and truly an opportunity to plan, even if you can't necessarily see where the end of this is going to be. But now is the time to educate yourself. Is there any resource that you can recommend to our viewers on where to find this type of information just to get started? I mean, someone like me, again, I don't know where to start.
Absolutely. So one thing that I use a lot is an application that allows you to trade with as simple as, $10. It's called Robinhood. It's an application you can download on your phone. And what it does is it allows you to create like a favorites list of different stocks. And it'll give you all the information, all the current alerts, things like that, the price. You can look at charts that go from yearly averages, 5-year averages, and then you can link your bank account to it. And you can basically create another account in that app, and you can start to transfer money from your bank account into that app. And once you're ready to actually buy stock, you can use that money in that account to buy stock. So for example, I downloaded the app probably 3 years ago. I took $200 from my bank account and put it into the app, but never used it, just had it sitting there. And then once I kind of saw the market starting to go down, I went and took that $200 and I brought 200 shares of a certain stock. And now I have that stock in my portfolio and it goes up and down every day. But it's as simple as that, and it allows you a chance to get a feel for how investing works and what it feels like to have your money go up one day and down one day. And you can start to understand what your risk profile is, because understanding how much risk you're willing to take is important too. That's going to determine what kind of stocks you're going to be able to get into. Because some stocks, obviously, that are more risky will give higher returns. But with that risk is a trade-off, correct? And so vice versa, with stocks that are more stable, they're not going to give us high return, but they're long-term, they'll probably give you a decent return. So I would say there are a lot of apps like that. Also, I like Google a lot, Google Finance. It gives you a lot of different stories that are summarized from other places like the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and it just kind of gives a nice one-stop shop to show you all the top stories from all the different sources. So I like to look at Google Finance, but those would be the two things I would say for right now for people who are trying to get start investing.
So those are folks who have resources to invest. Before we let you go, one last question. Let's take it all the way back to where we started in terms of these. I mean, I'm hearing numbers in terms of they're predicting 2.5 million in claims for unemployment this month alone. So we look at someone who has no income coming in at this point. What's the first thing? And it's, again, thinking about the fact it's not because you're a lazy worker, not because you've had any issues of your own that has caused this. If someone finds themselves out of work as a result of this pandemic, what is the piece of advice, the best piece of advice that you would provide them to help get back on a solid ground financially?
Right. I think the main thing would be, number one, to obviously try to file for unemployment. Number two, to understand what your monthly outflows are going to be. So if you don't already understand, what is it that you absolutely need to pay per month? And so let's say, for example, that's $500. So then based on that, I would try to say, okay, of that $500 I know I have to pay regardless of whatever happens to me, how much of that can I negotiate with my creditors or people who owe that money goes to? Because a lot of them are willing to work with you more than ever because of the different, situations that are going on for us. And then I guess lastly, what I would do is just say that I would try to, to the extent that you can, think about opportunities to develop other areas for revenue. So I know that right now it's hard to start doing things, but I think sometimes it's good as a motivational thing to say, okay, if you have an idea for a business or an idea for another stream of income, right now is a great time to do it because you have a lot of time. And a lot of times people don't have time to think about other ideas or create different types of opportunities. So if you have something that you really like, I would say try to pursue that and try to find areas of demand or holes in that area that you like. Or if you don't have something that you're really passionate about, but there's a need for something, and try to find something or develop something that can help support that need. So I think that mindset of trying to find something additional, it kind of keeps you motivated to say, okay, I can keep myself busy and I start to learn how to gain some more control by creating other streams of revenue. But The most important thing I would say is just understanding what your outflows are per month. Because if you have no money coming in, you got to understand what has to go out. And then who you can talk to try to negotiate some of that debt. Because like I said, a lot of them are doing a lot of different things because of what's going on. So you'd be surprised at what things are available. And then, like I said, secondly is understanding the stimulus packages that are coming out, just staying abreast, because it's going to happen fast. So you want to make sure that you don't miss out because they say, hey, you need to fill out this survey or you need to go on this website and register. You don't want to miss that. So.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to leave it right there. I'm going to thank you for joining us. There's a lot of great information for our viewing audience. It sounds like the main thing right now is plan, prepare, and do more planning and preparing because we don't know how long, again, this thing is going to last. And we also want to make sure that when it's over with, we have an opportunity to sustain a lifestyle that we're accustomed to and even get beyond that. So, again, thank you, Mr. Parker, Mr. Matthew Partner, managing partner of Aliff Parker Financial Services, LLC. You stay safe out there. You and your family, wish you all the best. And once again, appreciate you for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
These are very uncertain times, not just for us here in Detroit, but around the globe. And if there's anything to be learned about a virus that started in one part of the world, but now affecting the entire human population, it's that we're all connected. My health affects your health. Yours affects mine. Not just talking about physical health, but also emotional and financial, economic health. We don't know what tomorrow will look like, and we don't know when this thing is going to end. But if you're a person of faith or historian, you know that we will persevere through this and we will again thrive as a society. It's being predicted that the worst is yet to come, and maybe that's true. If it is, now's the time to put things in perspective. We know that we all need help and we can't do this by ourselves independently, and understanding that tomorrow things can change just like that. So when you help others, think about how you and your family will also need help in the future. With all the precautions and movement and physical contact, that's what help could actually look like. Help can be a phone call when you check in on someone and just simply listen. Help can be reaching out to a homebound and high-risk person and making sure that they have the helps that they need during this very challenging situation. Most of all, help definitely means taking the advice of health professionals, working to contain and eliminate the spread of this rapidly growing virus. We will continue to update you all in District 1 and around the city of Detroit with various information on our District 1 media pages, social media pages, to help you and your family navigate through this pandemic. You'll also find information at the end of this video that will help provide information on food access, financial resources, and other services. I want to thank my entire team for helping me put this video together because they care about the community, they care about the residents. I also want to thank the guests for participating today and joining us and providing very valuable information. But I also want to thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you found some information that is going to help provide you navigate through this uncertain time. Also, make sure you share this information with someone who you believe will be a benefit of it. Until then, I want to thank you again for tuning in. Signing off, this is Councilmember James Tate, representing District 1. See you soon.